The dust rose in thick clouds as the stagecoach rumbled to a halt outside Miller's trading post. Sarah Chen stepped down, her worn boots hitting the Wyoming dirt with a soft thud. 23 years old, and she'd already buried a husband, lost a homestead to the bank, and traveled 300 miles with nothing but the clothes on her back and $12 sewn into her petticoat. The trading post was little more than a weathered building with a crooked sign, but it was the last stop before the mining camps of South Pass. Sarah had heard there was work there: cooking, laundry, mending. Honest work for women willing to endure the rough conditions and rougher men. "End of the line, miss," the driver called down, already unloading her single carpet bag. Sarah nodded, squinting against the late afternoon sun. The settlement consisted of perhaps a dozen buildings scattered along a rutted road. Miners, ranch hands, and drifters moved between the saloon and the general store, their eyes following her with varying degrees of interest. She clutched her bag tighter and headed toward the trading post. A bell jangled as she pushed through the door into the dimmer interior. The store smelled of tobacco, leather, and something else: desperation, perhaps, or just the accumulated odors of too many unwashed bodies passing through. Behind the counter stood a barrel-chested man with gray-streaked hair and calculating eyes. "Help you? I'm looking for directions to the mining camps. I heard there's work." "Work?" He barked a laugh. "You and every other woman who stumbles through here. Camps are full up. Been full for months." Sarah's heart sank, but she kept her expression neutral. "I see. Is there other work nearby? Ranches, perhaps?" The man studied her with an intensity that made her skin crawl. "You married? Widowed? Got family expecting you?" Sarah hesitated a moment too long. "No." Something shifted in the man's demeanor. He came around the counter, moving with a purposefulness that set her instincts screaming. "Name's Pike. I run this post and a few other enterprises. Might be I can help you find employment." "What kind of employment?" Pike smiled, and it didn't reach his eyes. "The kind that pays better than scrubbing miners' long johns. You're young, clean-looking. There's men out here who'd pay good money for companionship." Sarah's stomach turned. "I'm looking for honest work, Mr. Pike." "This is honest work. Simple transaction. You provide a service, you get paid. Hell, you might even find yourself a husband out of it." He moved closer. "Better than starving, ain't it?" Before Sarah could respond, the door opened behind her. She turned to see a man enter, tall, perhaps 30 years old, with dark hair beneath a wide-brimmed hat and eyes that took in the scene with immediate understanding. "Pike," the newcomer said, his voice low and even. "Harassing travelers again?" Pike's expression soured. "Mind your business, Bridger. I'm having a private conversation with the lady." "Didn't look private. Looked like you were blocking her exit." The man called Bridger moved further into the store, positioning himself between Sarah and Pike. "Miss, you got somewhere you need to be?" Sarah found her voice. "I was just leaving." "The hell you are," Pike snarled. "She owes me for information." "What information?" "That the camps are full. That's common knowledge." Bridger's hand rested casually near the revolver at his hip. "Miss, I'd be happy to escort you wherever you're headed." Pike's face reddened. "You're making an enemy here, Bridger. Won't be the first time." For a tense moment, Sarah thought Pike might draw on him. But the store owner's eyes flicked to the gun at Bridger's side and apparently thought better of it. "Get out. Both of you." Sarah didn't need to be told twice. She grabbed her bag and hurried to the door, Bridger following at a measured pace. Outside, she gulped the dusty air like it was fresh mountain water, her hands trembling with delayed reaction. "Thank you," she managed. "He was. I know what he was." Bridger glanced back at the trading post. Pike runs a network through these parts. Identifies desperate women, offers them opportunities that usually end badly. You're lucky you didn't take him up on it. Sarah swallowed hard. I wasn't planning to. But I am desperate. The camps really are full? Mostly. But there are other options. He studied her with an intensity different from Pike's, assessing rather than predatory. You said you're looking for honest work. Can you read and write? Yes. I was a schoolteacher before I married. Something flickered in his expression. I might know someone who needs help. It's not glamorous, and the pay's modest, but it's honest. Sarah felt a surge of hope tempered by caution. What's the work? Teaching. There's a small settlement about 10 miles north, mostly ranch families with kids who need schooling. The woman who was teaching them moved east last month. They've been looking for a replacement. And you know this how? I know a lot of things. He tipped his hat slightly. Name's Daniel Bridger. I do various work in the territory, tracking, guiding, occasionally helping folks who need it. Sarah studied him carefully. He was clean-shaven, his clothes worn but well-maintained. His eyes were gray, direct, and held none of the predatory gleam she'd seen in Pike's. Sarah Chen. And I appreciate the help, truly, but why? You don't know me. Let's just say I've got reasons for not liking men like Pike. He nodded toward a horse tied outside the saloon. It's too late to head out tonight, but the boarding house down the street is run by a decent woman named Mrs. Patterson. Tell her I sent you, she'll give you a fair rate and a safe room. I can't afford. First night's on me. Consider it an investment in education. Before she could protest, he pressed $2 silver into her hand. Tomorrow morning, I'll take you up to the settlement. If the position works out, you can pay me back. If it doesn't, we'll figure out something else. Sarah stared at the coins, then at his face. Why are you doing this? Bridger's expression went distant for a moment. Because someone did something similar for me once. Seemed right to pass it along. He touched his hat brim again. Mrs. Patterson's. Tell her Daniel sent you. I'll come by at dawn. Before Sarah could ask anything else, he turned and walked away, leaving her standing in the dusty street with $2 silver and more questions than answers. Mrs. Patterson's boarding house proved exactly as advertised, clean, modest, and run by a no-nonsense woman in her 50s who took one look at Sarah and seemed to understand everything without being told. Daniel Bridger sent you? She nodded approvingly. That boy's got a good heart, even if he doesn't advertise it. Come on, I'll get you settled. The room was small but scrupulously clean, with a bed that didn't sag and a window that actually opened. Sarah sat on the edge of the mattress, exhausted but too wound up to sleep. A knock came at the door an hour later. Mrs. Patterson entered with a tray of food. Figured you might be hungry. Don't worry about payment, Daniel's credit is good here. He seems to have a lot of friends, Sarah observed. And a fair number of enemies. Mrs. Patterson set down the tray. Pike and his associates don't appreciate Daniel interfering with their business. But Daniel doesn't much care what they appreciate. Sarah picked at the stew. What is his business, exactly? Mrs. Patterson considered her words. Officially? He's a tracker and guide. Helps people find their way through the territory, locates missing persons, that sort of thing. Unofficially? She met Sarah's eyes. He helps people who've fallen through the cracks. Women in bad situations mostly. Gets them out, gets them somewhere safe. That's unusual. It is. And there's folks who don't like it, Pike especially, since Daniel costs him money every time he rescues one of Pike's would-be girls. Mrs. Patterson moved toward the door. But you're safe here tonight. Tomorrow, if you go with him to that settlement, you'll be safer still. The folks up there are good people. When she'd gone, Sarah ate mechanically, her mind spinning. She'd escaped one bad situation today, but she knew her luck couldn't hold forever. The $12 in her petticoat wouldn't last long, and winter would come eventually. She thought of Daniel Bridger's gray eyes, the easy way he'd positioned himself between her and Pike, the casual competence of his movements. He'd helped her without asking anything in return, which in her experience was almost unheard of. Maybe, she thought as exhaustion finally claimed her, maybe there were still good people in the world after all. Dawn came cold and clear. Sarah woke to find her dress brushed clean and her boots polished, Mrs. Patterson's doing, no doubt. She dressed quickly, braided her dark hair, and went downstairs to find Daniel waiting in the parlor, a cup of coffee in his hands. "Sleep well?" he asked. "Better than I expected." He nodded toward the door. "Horse is ready. It's about a 2-hour ride north. Trail's not bad if you're comfortable on horseback. I can manage." The horse proved to be a gentle mare, and Daniel's own mount was a sturdy gelding that moved with the easy pace of an animal used to long distances. They rode in companionable silence for the first hour, the landscape gradually shifting from flat scrubland to rolling hills dotted with pine. "Tell me about this settlement," Sarah finally said. "Pine Ridge. About 15 families, mostly ranchers running cattle and sheep. They pooled resources to build a schoolhouse 2 years ago, but they've had trouble keeping teachers. Too isolated for most folks. And you think they'll hire me? Just like that?" Daniel glanced at her. "If you're qualified and willing to stay through winter, yes. They're desperate enough that they won't ask too many questions about your past." Sarah tensed. "What makes you think I have a past to hide? Everyone out here does. That's why they came west in the first place." His voice held no judgment. "Mrs. Patterson mentioned you're widowed. That all I need to know?" Sarah considered how much to share. "My husband died of fever last winter. His brother claimed the homestead said it was rightfully his. I couldn't fight him, had no money for lawyers, no family to back me up. So I left." "Brother have a legal claim?" "Not really. But he had friends in the land office who were willing to file the paperwork his way." The old bitterness crept into her voice. "Turns out justice costs money I didn't have." Daniel was quiet for a moment. "That's how it works out here. Men with money and connections can rewrite reality to suit themselves. Happened to my family too." "What happened?" He didn't answer immediately, his eyes on the trail ahead. "My father was a rancher. Small operation but profitable. When I was 19, some bigger outfits decided they wanted his land. They manufactured a debt, got a judge to sign off on it, and took everything. My father fought them in court for 2 years. Died of a heart attack the day the final judgment came down against him. I'm sorry. Was a long time ago." But the tightness in his voice suggested otherwise. "My mother passed a year later. I spent the next few years making trouble for the men who'd stolen from us. Got myself arrested more than once. Eventually realized revenge wasn't going to bring my parents back or get the land returned. So you started helping other people instead? Seemed more productive than rotting in jail or getting shot." He shifted in his saddle. "First person I helped was a woman whose husband had been killed by claim jumpers. She had 3 kids and nowhere to go. Got her connected with a church group heading to Oregon. She made it safely, sent me a letter thanking me." He shrugged. "Felt better than anything I'd done in years. So I kept doing it." Sarah studied his profile, the strong jaw, the weathered skin of someone who spent most of his time outdoors, the way his eyes constantly scanned their surroundings even while talking. "Pike and his friends must hate you." "They do. I've cost them considerable money over the years. But they're careful about moving against me directly. I know too much about their operations, and I've made sure that information would get to the territorial authorities if anything happened to me. Is that enough to protect you? Daniel's smile was grim. So far. But men like Pike are patient. They'll wait for the right opportunity. He glanced at her. Which is why I try not to have people too closely associated with me. Once I get you settled at Pine Ridge, it's probably best if we keep our distance. Can't have Pike thinking you're connected to me, makes you a target. The thought of losing this unexpected ally sent an unwelcome pang through Sarah's chest, but she understood the logic. Makes sense. You'll be safe there though. The folks at Pine Ridge don't have much truck with Pike's crowd. And they take care of their own. They crested a hill and the settlement came into view, a collection of cabins and a few larger buildings arranged around a central area where a white-painted schoolhouse stood out against the weathered wood of the other structures. That's it, Daniel said. Not much to look at, but good people. As they descended toward the settlement, a woman emerged from one of the larger cabins. She was perhaps 40, with graying brown hair and the capable look of someone used to hard work. Daniel Bridger, she called out. About time you showed your face around here. Mrs. Holloway. Daniel dismounted and helped Sarah down. Brought someone who might solve your schoolteacher problem. Mrs. Holloway's eyes lit up as she approached. A teacher? Lord knows we need one. What's your name, dear? Sarah Chen. Well, Sarah Chen, can you wrangle 15 children ranging from 6 to 14 years old and teach them reading, writing, and arithmetic? I taught school in Kansas for 2 years before I married. I believe I can manage. Then you're hired, assuming you can start Monday. Mrs. Holloway's directness was refreshing. Pay is $30 a month plus room and board. You'll stay with me and my husband. We've got extra space since our boys moved out. Schoolhouse needs some fixing up but nothing major. Deal? Sarah blinked at the speed of it all. That's, yes. Yes, deal. Good. Daniel, you staying for lunch? Can't. Got business back at Miller's Post. He touched his hat brim to Sarah. You're in good hands here. Mrs. Holloway runs this place like a general, but fair. I am standing right here, Mrs. Holloway said dryly. Daniel smiled, the first genuine smile Sarah had seen from him. It transformed his face, making him look younger, less careworn. Best kind of general there is. As he mounted his horse to leave, Sarah found herself stepping forward. Daniel. Thank you. For everything. He met her eyes, and something passed between them, recognition, perhaps, of kindred spirits shaped by similar hardships. Good luck, Miss Chen. I expect you'll do well here. Then he was riding away, and Sarah was left standing in the dusty yard of Pine Ridge, her new home, watching until he disappeared over the ridge. He's a good man, Mrs. Holloway said quietly beside her. Saved my niece from a bad situation a few years back. Whole family's grateful. He seems to make a habit of it. He does. Come on, let me show you the schoolhouse and your room. We've got a lot to do before Monday. The next 2 weeks passed in a blur of activity. Sarah threw herself into preparing the schoolhouse, cleaning, organizing supplies, planning lessons. The children of Pine Ridge arrived Monday morning with varying degrees of enthusiasm, but Sarah found her rhythm quickly. Teaching had always come naturally to her, and these students were eager learners despite their rough edges. Mrs. Holloway proved an excellent host, supportive without being intrusive, helpful without being overbearing. Her husband, Jack, ran a prosperous cattle operation and was respected throughout the settlement. Other families welcomed Sarah with a warmth she hadn't expected, inviting her to dinners and church services, slowly weaving her into the fabric of their community. She didn't see Daniel again, though she thought of him more often than she wanted to admit. Late at night, alone in her small room, she'd remember the gray of his eyes, the quiet competence of his movements, the way he'd stepped between her and Pike without hesitation. She told herself it was gratitude, nothing more. He'd helped her, gotten her to safety, and that was the end of it. Getting attached to a man who lived on the edge of danger would be foolish. But her heart apparently didn't care much for logic. The first trouble came 3 weeks after her arrival. Sarah was dismissing class for the day when a man rode up to the schoolhouse, rough-looking, with a scar across his left cheek and eyes that reminded her unpleasantly of Pike's. "You Miss Chen?" he called from his horse. Sarah positioned herself between him and her students. "I am." "And you are?" "Name's Carter. Work for Mr. Pike down at Miller's Post. He sent me with a message." Sarah's blood ran cold. "I have no business with Mr. Pike. He thinks different. Says you owe him for information and assistance. Says you left Miller's Post without settling your accounts." "That's a lie. I owe Pike nothing." Carter smiled unpleasantly. "Pike don't see it that way. He's willing to be reasonable though. You come work for him for 6 months, he'll call the debt square." Several of the older boys had stopped behind Sarah, sensing trouble. She kept her voice steady. "Tell Mr. Pike that I have no debt to him and no intention of working for him. Now please leave. You're disturbing my students." "Pike ain't gonna like that answer." "I don't particularly care what Pike likes." Carter's expression hardened. "You're making a mistake, lady. Pike's got reach. He can make life difficult for folks who cross him. And I've got 15 witnesses to you threatening a schoolteacher on settlement property." Mrs. Holloway's voice rang out from behind Carter. She stood on her porch with a rifle cradled casually in her arms. "Jack," she called over her shoulder. "We got unwelcome visitors." Several men emerged from nearby cabins, all armed. Carter's eyes darted between them, calculating odds he clearly didn't like. "This ain't over," he said to Sarah. "Actually, it is." Jack Holloway stepped forward, his own rifle ready. "You tell Pike that Miss Chen is under Pine Ridge's protection. He wants to claim she owes him money, he can take it up with the territorial court. Otherwise, he stays away from our teacher and our settlement. We clear?" Carter spat in the dust but turned his horse. "You're making enemies." "Wouldn't be the first time," Jack replied evenly. They watched Carter ride away, his threats hanging in the air like smoke. Sarah's hands trembled as the adrenaline faded, and she realized how close she'd come to another nightmare. "He'll be back," she said quietly. "Or Pike will send someone else. Let him try." Mrs. Holloway lowered her rifle. "We protect our own here, Sarah. You're one of us now." That night, as Sarah lay awake listening to the wind through the pines, she heard a soft knock at her door. She opened it to find Jack Holloway, hat in hand, looking uncomfortable. "Sorry to bother you this late, Miss Chen. But I sent word to Daniel Bridger about what happened today. Figured he should know Pike's making moves." "You didn't have to do that." "Actually, I did. Daniel asked me to keep an eye on you, make sure you settled in all right. This situation with Pike, Daniel needs to know. He's dealt with Pike longer than any of us." Sarah absorbed this. Daniel had been watching over her even after he left. The knowledge brought warmth and worry in equal measure. "Thank you, Mr. Holloway. Call me Jack." "And Sarah?" "Daniel's good at what he does. If Pike's planning something, Daniel will figure out how to stop it." 2 days later, Daniel rode into Pine Ridge just after dawn. Sarah was already at the schoolhouse, preparing lessons, when she heard the horse outside. She looked up to see him in the doorway, hat in hand, his expression serious. "Heard you had trouble," he said without preamble. "News travels fast. Jack sent word. Pike sending Carter here is a bad sign. He's escalating." Sarah set down her chalk. Why? I'm nobody to him. Just another woman who refused his opportunities. You're more than that now. You're someone I helped, which makes you a symbol. Pike wants to prove he's still in control, that I can't just pull people out of his reach without consequences. Daniel stepped fully into the schoolhouse, and Sarah was struck again by his presence, the way he seemed to fill a space without dominating it. I'm sorry. I didn't mean to paint a target on your back. You saved me from Pike in the first place. I'll take the target if it means I'm not working for him. Daniel's eyes softened slightly. Still. I should have been more careful. What happens now? He was quiet for a moment, clearly weighing his words. Pike's testing the waters. He sent Carter to see if the settlement would actually stand up for you. Now he knows they will, which changes his calculations. He might back off, or he might try something more direct. More direct how? Hard to say. Pike's not stupid, he won't risk open conflict with a whole settlement. But he might try to catch you alone, or manufacture some legal trouble. He's got a few corrupt officials in his pocket. Sarah felt the walls closing in again, the same trapped feeling she'd had when her husband's brother took her home. So what do I do? Run again? No. Daniel's voice was firm. Running just means he wins. You stay here where you've got people watching your back. But you need to be smart, don't travel alone, vary your routines, stay alert. For how long? Until Pike finds an easier target or I find leverage to make him back off permanently. Sarah moved to the window, staring out at the peaceful settlement. She'd built something here in just a few weeks, a place, a purpose, people who cared. The thought of Pike taking that away kindled a hot anger in her chest. There has to be another way. Some way to end this that doesn't involve just waiting for Pike to make his next move. Daniel joined her at the window. I've been working on that. Pike's operation runs on intimidation and people being too scared to testify against him. But I've been collecting evidence for years, statements from women he's coerced, records of bribes he's paid, connections to criminal activity. Problem is getting it to someone with the authority and integrity to act on it. Who would that be? There's a federal marshal, name of Clayton Webb. He's been investigating corruption in the territory for the past year. If I can get my evidence to him, along with your testimony about what Pike tried to do, it might be enough to bring charges. Hope flickered in Sarah's chest. Then let's do it. I'll testify. It's not without risk. Pike has ways of getting to witnesses. And even if Webb brings charges, trials take time. You'd be in danger throughout. Sarah turned to face him fully. I've been in danger since my husband died and his brother stole my home. I've been in danger every day I've spent in this territory without money or protection. At least this time I'd be fighting back instead of just surviving. Something like admiration flickered in Daniel's expression. You're braver than you give yourself credit for. Not brave. Just tired of being afraid. Daniel held her gaze, and Sarah felt that connection again, the understanding between two people who'd both been knocked down by an unjust world but refused to stay down. All right, he said finally. I'll contact Marshal Webb, arrange a meeting. But we do this carefully. No one can know what we're planning, especially not Pike. Over the next week, Daniel became a regular presence in Pine Ridge, ostensibly helping Jack Holloway with some tracking work but really coordinating with Sarah and building their case against Pike. They met in the schoolhouse after hours, going over Sarah's statement, reviewing Daniel's evidence, planning their approach. Sarah found herself looking forward to these evening meetings more than she should. Daniel was different when they worked together, still serious, but occasionally revealing flashes of dry humor or unexpected insight. He talked about the people he'd helped over the years, the small victories that kept him going despite the risks. Don't you ever want something more stable? Sarah asked one evening as they reviewed documents by lamplight. A home, a family, something that doesn't involve constantly looking over your shoulder? Daniel was silent for a long moment. Used to think I did. But after my parents died, after everything I lost, I couldn't see the point. Seemed like anything I built would just get taken away again. That's a lonely way to live. It is, he admitted. But it's been the only way that made sense to me. He looked up from the papers, meeting her eyes. Lately though, I've been wondering if maybe I was wrong about that. What changed? Met someone who reminded me what it's like to have something worth protecting beyond just an abstract concept of justice. Sarah's heart beat faster. Daniel. A knock at the schoolhouse door interrupted her. Jack Holloway stood outside, his expression grim. Daniel, Sarah, you need to see this. They followed him to his cabin where Mrs. Holloway sat at the table, a letter in her trembling hands. Her face was pale. It's from Pike, she said quietly. He's threatening the settlement. Says if we continue harboring someone who owes him money, he'll make sure our cattle can't get to market. Says he's got connections with the railroad that would make life very difficult for us. Jack's jaw was tight. He's trying to turn the settlement against Sarah. Making it too expensive for us to protect her. Sarah felt sick. I'll leave. I won't let him hurt all of you because of me. The hell you will, Mrs. Holloway said sharply. Sorry for the language, but no. We don't bend to threats from men like Pike. She's right, Jack added. We stand together, or we fall separately. Pike backs down one of us, he'll come after all of us eventually. Daniel had been reading the letter over Mrs. Holloway's shoulder. This is good actually. Everyone stared at him. Good? Sarah couldn't believe what she was hearing. Pike just made a written threat of economic coercion. That's a federal offense, interstate commerce interference. This letter, combined with Sarah's testimony and my other evidence, gives Marshal Webb everything he needs to arrest Pike and launch a full investigation. Jack's expression shifted from worried to calculating. You're sure about that? Positive. Pike got overconfident. He's so used to intimidating people that he put his threats in writing. Daniel folded the letter carefully. I'll ride to Cheyenne tomorrow, deliver this to Webb personally. Should have deputies out here within a week. And in the meantime? Mrs. Holloway asked. We stay alert and stick together. Pike won't risk open violence, too many witnesses. He's counting on the threat being enough to make you cave. That night, Sarah couldn't sleep. She kept replaying the evening's events, thinking about how many lives had been disrupted because Pike saw her as a way to strike at Daniel. The weight of it pressed down on her chest. She finally gave up on sleep and went to sit on the Holloway's porch, wrapping a blanket around her shoulders against the cool night air. Couldn't sleep either. She jumped, then saw Daniel sitting on the porch steps, barely visible in the darkness. What are you doing here? She asked, sitting beside him. Keeping watch. Didn't think Pike would try anything tonight, but better safe than sorry. They sat in comfortable silence for a while, listening to the night sounds, wind through pines, distant coyotes, the soft movements of horses in the nearby corral. I'm sorry, Sarah said finally. For dragging you and everyone else into this mess. You didn't drag anyone anywhere. Pike created this situation, not you. But if I just kept moving, found somewhere else, you'd still be running. Still be looking over your shoulder. Still be letting men like Pike dictate your life. Daniel turned to look at her. You deserve better than that. So do you. You spend all your time helping other people, but who helps you? Don't need help. Everyone needs help sometimes. Even Daniel Bridger, protector of the downtrodden. He smiled slightly at her teasing tone. Is that what I am? Isn't it? Maybe. He was quiet for a moment. Or maybe I'm just a man trying to make up for the times I couldn't protect the people who mattered most. Sarah thought of his parents, dying after losing everything they'd built. You can't save everyone, Daniel. I know. But I can try. She reached out, placing her hand over his on the porch step. You saved me. That counts for something. Daniel looked down at their joined hands, then back up at her face. In the moonlight, his eyes were dark and unreadable. Sarah, I need to tell you something before I ride to Cheyenne tomorrow. What is it? These past few weeks, working with you, getting to know you, it's been different. Good different. You're smart and brave and you don't quit even when you have every reason to. He paused, seeming to struggle with the words. I'm trying to say that my interest in your safety might not be entirely professional anymore. Sarah's breath caught. Daniel. You don't have to say anything. I know the timing's terrible and you've got enough to worry about without adding complicated feelings to the mix. But I wanted to be honest before I left, in case. He trailed off. In case something happens to you, Sarah finished quietly. It's a possibility. Pike's dangerous when cornered. Sarah tightened her grip on his hand. Then be careful. And when you get back, we'll talk about these complicated feelings. Because they might not be as one-sided as you think. Daniel's expression shifted, surprise, hope, something that looked almost like wonder. Yeah. Yeah. She smiled despite the fear churning in her stomach. But you have to come back first. Deal? Deal. They sat together on the porch until dawn began to paint the eastern sky pink and gold. When Daniel finally stood to prepare for his journey, Sarah rose with him. How long will you be gone? She asked. 3 days there, however long it takes to brief Webb and get the deputies organized, 3 days back. Figure a week total, maybe slightly more. A week. It felt like forever. Daniel seemed to read her thoughts. He reached out, gently cupping her face in his hand, the first time he'd touched her beyond helping her dismount a horse. I'll come back, Sarah. That's a promise. She leaned into his touch. I'm holding you to that. He left as the sun cleared the horizon, riding east toward Cheyenne and Marshall Webb. Sarah stood watching until he disappeared from view, the same way she had that first day in Pine Ridge. But this time felt different. This time, she was watching someone who mattered leave, someone she hoped would return not just for her safety but for her heart. The week that followed was the longest of Sarah's life. She threw herself into teaching, into the daily routines of settlement life, trying not to count the hours until Daniel's return. Mrs. Holloway watched her with knowing eyes but said nothing, just kept her busy with extra tasks whenever the worry became too obvious. On the 5th day, Carter returned, this time with 3 other men. They rode into Pine Ridge at midday, when the children were at lunch and half the settlement was visible and watching. We're here to collect what's owed, Carter announced, his hand resting on his gun. Pike's tired of waiting. Miss Chen needs to come with us. Sarah stood on the schoolhouse steps, her students clustered behind her. Every adult in the settlement seemed to materialize from nearby buildings, armed and ready. Pike's not getting his hands on our teacher, Jack Holloway said flatly. We've been over this. Things have changed. Pike's got a legal judgment saying Miss Chen owes him money. We're here to enforce it. Carter waved a paper that looked official from a distance. Sarah's heart sank. This was Pike's move, manufacturing legal cover for his intimidation. Let me see that judgment, Jack demanded. Carter urged his horse forward, holding out the paper just close enough for Jack to read without being able to grab it. Jack's expression darkened as he scanned the document. This is signed by Judge Harmon. Everyone knows Harmon's in Pike's pocket. Don't matter who signed it. It's legal. Now hand over the woman or we'll take her by force. The settlement men raised their weapons. Sarah felt sick, this was about to turn into a bloodbath, and it was all because of her. Wait, she called out, stepping forward. No one needs to get hurt. I'll go with them. The hell you will, Mrs. Holloway snapped. Sarah, get back inside. But before anyone could move, the sound of approaching horses echoed from the east trail. A moment later, 6 riders appeared, Daniel in front, followed by 5 men wearing federal marshal badges. Carter's face went pale. What the? That's far enough, Carter. The lead marshal, a grizzled man in his 50s, rode forward with his rifle across his saddle. I'm Marshal Clayton Webb, and you and your associates are under arrest for attempted kidnapping and conspiracy. We got a legal judgment. Carter protested, waving the paper. Forged document doesn't count as legal, Webb replied. Judge Harmon's been arrested as of this morning for accepting bribes and falsifying court records. Pike's in custody too. Now drop your weapons, or we'll add resisting arrest to the charges. The 4 men looked at each other, calculating odds. With 5 federal marshals and a dozen armed settlers facing them, they slowly lowered their guns. As Webb's deputies moved forward to make the arrests, Daniel rode to the schoolhouse. He looked exhausted, dust-covered and worn from hard riding, but his eyes went straight to Sarah. "You're all right?" he asked, dismounting quickly. "I am now." She wanted to run to him, throw her arms around him, but awareness of all the watching eyes kept her rooted to the spot. "You came back. Told you I would." His smile was tired but genuine. "Brought some friends to make sure Pike won't be bothering anyone anymore." Marshal Webb finished securing the prisoners and approached the schoolhouse. "Miss Chen, I'll need your formal statement for the trial. Mr. Bridger's given us considerable evidence, but your testimony about Pike's initial attempt to coerce you will help establish the pattern of behavior." "Of course. Whatever you need." "Good. We've got similar statements from 8 other women. Together, you're going to put Pike away for a very long time." Webb glanced at the assembled settlers. "You folks did the right thing, standing up to him. Made my job a lot easier." As the marshals prepared to transport their prisoners back to Cheyenne, the settlement erupted in celebration. The threat that had hung over them was finally gone. Mrs. Holloway organized an impromptu feast, and within an hour, the central area was filled with tables, food, and relieved, happy people. Sarah found herself swept up in the festivities, accepting congratulations and thanks from families who'd feared for their livelihoods. But her attention kept drifting to Daniel, who stood at the edge of the gathering talking quietly with Marshal Webb. Finally, as the sun began to set, she managed to extract herself from the crowd and join him. "Marshal Webb just left," Daniel said as she approached. "He'll send word when the trial date is set. Probably be a few months." "And Pike? He's really finished?" "Between the evidence I've collected, your testimony, and the other women willing to speak up, he's looking at 20 years minimum. His whole network is collapsing, deputies are rounding up his associates throughout the territory." Sarah let out a breath she felt like she'd been holding for weeks. "It's really over." "It is." Daniel turned to face her fully. "Which means you're free to live your life without looking over your shoulder. Teach these kids, build something here. Be safe." There was something in his tone, a finality that made Sarah's chest tighten. "You're leaving. My work here is done. You don't need me anymore." "What if I want you anyway?" Daniel's expression softened, but also grew sad. "Sarah, you deserve stability. A normal life. Not someone who's constantly riding off into danger, who's made enemies across the territory. Shouldn't I get to decide what I deserve?" She stepped closer. "You told me before you left that your interest in my safety wasn't entirely professional anymore. Did that change?" "No. If anything, it got stronger, which is exactly why I should leave. You'll be safer without." Sarah closed the remaining distance between them and kissed him. For a moment, Daniel froze in surprise. Then his arms came around her, pulling her close as he kissed her back with an intensity that took her breath away. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Sarah looked up at him with determination. "I've spent the last 2 years having other people decide my future. My husband's brother, Pike, circumstance. I'm done with that. I choose you, Daniel Bridger. If you'll have me." "I've got nothing to offer you," he said, though his arms hadn't loosened their hold. "No home, no steady income. You've got yourself. That's enough." She touched his face gently. "I'm not asking you to stop helping people or change who you are. I'm asking you to come back here when you can. Make this your home base. Let me be your reason to return." Daniel stared at her like she was offering him something he'd never dared to hope for. "You're sure?" "Because once I say yes, I'm not letting go." "I'm sure." "Are you?" In answer, he kissed her again, this time tender and full of promise. Around them, the celebration continued, but Sarah was only aware of Daniel, the solid warmth of him, the way he held her like she was precious, the future opening up before them like the vast Wyoming sky. When they finally rejoined the gathering, hand in hand, Mrs. Holloway took one look at them and smiled knowingly. "About time," she muttered to her husband. The next few months passed in a blur of happiness Sarah hadn't thought possible. Daniel stayed in Pine Ridge, helping with various work around the settlement while waiting for Pike's trial. He and Sarah courted properly, evening walks, Sunday dinners with the Holloways, teaching him to help with the younger students' reading lessons. The settlement embraced him as one of their own, grateful for his role in ending Pike's threat. He rented a small cabin on the edge of Pine Ridge, and Sarah found herself spending more and more time there, talking late into the night about their pasts, their hopes, their slowly solidifying plans for the future. When the letter came requesting Sarah's testimony at Pike's trial, Daniel insisted on accompanying her to Cheyenne. They made the journey together, stopping at Mrs. Patterson's boarding house, where the widow greeted them with knowing looks and sly comments about Daniel finally finding someone to settle him down. The trial lasted 3 days. Sarah gave her testimony clearly and calmly, describing Pike's initial attempts to coerce her and Carter's subsequent threats. 7 other women testified similarly, painting a damning picture of Pike's operation. The jury deliberated for less than 2 hours before returning a guilty verdict on all counts. As the judge sentenced Pike to 25 years in territorial prison, Sarah felt a weight lift from her shoulders, not just fear of Pike, but the accumulated burden of years spent powerless against men who abused their authority. That evening, as she and Daniel walked through Cheyenne streets, he stopped suddenly and turned to face her. "Sarah Chen, I've been thinking." "Dangerous habit," she teased. "I'm serious." He took both her hands. "I want to marry you. Not because it's practical or strategic, but because I love you and I can't imagine my life without you in it." Sarah's heart soared. "Yes. I haven't finished proposing. Don't care." "Yes." He laughed, and the sound was joyous, free of the weight he usually carried. "I'll still need to travel sometimes. Help people who need it. But Pine Ridge will be home. Our home. And I'll always come back to you. I know you will." She squeezed his hands. "Because I'll be waiting. Teaching our students, building our life, ready to hear about your adventures and patch you up when you come back battered." "Sounds perfect." They married a month later in Pine Ridge's small church, with the entire settlement in attendance. Mrs. Holloway cried, Jack Holloway gave Sarah away with fatherly pride, and the children from Sarah's school sang hymns with enthusiastic if not always perfectly pitched voices. Marshal Webb attended, bringing news that Pike's associates had been rounded up throughout the territory and that Daniel's evidence had sparked a broader investigation into corruption in the territorial government. Several judges and officials had been removed from office, and reforms were underway. "You started something important," Webb told Daniel during the reception. "Helped a lot of people find justice who wouldn't have gotten it otherwise." "Just doing what needed doing," Daniel replied, but Sarah could see the satisfaction in his eyes, the knowledge that his parents' loss had been transformed into something meaningful. That night, in the cabin that was now theirs, Sarah and Daniel lay tangled together in the darkness, listening to the wind through the pines. "Happy," he murmured against her hair. "Happier than I ever thought possible." "Good. Because I plan on spending the rest of my life making sure you stay that way." Sarah smiled into the darkness. She'd come to Wyoming territory with nothing, no money, no prospects, no hope. She'd been threatened, targeted, and nearly forced into a life she couldn't bear to imagine. But she'd also found strength she didn't know she possessed, a community that valued and protected her, and a man who'd shown her that not all strength came from dominance, that true protection came from respect and choice. The future stretched before them, uncertain in its details but bright with possibility. There would be challenges. Daniel's work would still take him away sometimes, and building a life in the harsh Wyoming territory was never easy. But they would face those challenges together, as partners, as equals, as two people who'd chosen each other despite everything the world had thrown at them. Sarah fell asleep in Daniel's arms, no longer afraid of what tomorrow might bring. She had found her home, not in a place, but in the man beside her and the life they would build together. 6 months later, Sarah stood in front of her classroom, watching her students work through their arithmetic problems. Through the window, she could see Daniel in the yard, repairing a fence with Jack Holloway. He'd been back from his latest journey for 3 days, having helped a widow and her children escape a claim jumper situation near Laramie. He'd come home with a bruised rib and stories of narrow escapes, and Sarah had patched him up with practiced hands before scolding him for taking unnecessary risks. Then she'd kissed him until both of them forgot about risks and consequences entirely. Life had settled into a rhythm. Daniel would spend a few weeks at home, helping around Pine Ridge and the surrounding ranches, then a message would come about someone who needed help, and he'd ride out again. Sarah had learned not to worry too much during his absences. He always came back, usually with another family saved from desperate circumstances. The settlement had grown in the months since Pike's arrest. 2 new families had moved in, drawn by the safety and community Pine Ridge offered. Sarah's school now had 20 students, and there was talk of building an addition to accommodate more. Mrs. Holloway had taken Sarah aside last week with a knowing look. "You've been looking a bit peaked in the mornings, dear. Anything you want to tell me?" Sarah had blushed but nodded. "I think I might be expecting. Haven't told Daniel yet, wanted to be sure first." The older woman had embraced her warmly. "That man's going to be insufferable with joy. You know that, right?" She'd been right. When Sarah told Daniel that evening, he'd picked her up and spun her around despite her protests about his healing rib. Then he'd sat her down gently, his hands trembling as they rested on her still flat stomach, his eyes bright with unshed tears. "A family," he'd whispered. "A real family." "We already are a family," Sarah had reminded him. "This just makes us bigger." Now, watching him through the window, Sarah felt a contentment she'd never imagined possible. Her hand drifted unconsciously to her stomach, where their child grew, a symbol of everything they'd built together, everything they'd overcome. Daniel looked up from his work and caught her watching. He smiled, that rare, transformative smile that still made her heart skip, and waved. She waved back, then returned her attention to her students. "Miss Warren?" One of the younger girls raised her hand. "When's Mr. Bridger gonna teach us tracking again? He promised to show us how to read animal signs." "I'm sure he'll make time before his next trip," Sarah assured her. "He never breaks his promises." It was true. In all their months together, Daniel had never once failed to keep his word. He'd promised to come back, and he always did. He'd promised to build a life with her, and he had. He'd promised to love her, and he showed it every single day in 1,000 small ways. The bell rang, dismissing class. Students filed out, calling goodbyes and running off to their various homes. Sarah tidied her desk, gathering papers and planning lessons for tomorrow. Daniel appeared in the doorway, leaning against the frame with that easy grace she loved. "Ready to head home, Mrs. Bridger?" "Almost. Just need to finish these. The papers can wait." He crossed to her desk and took her hands, pulling her gently to her feet. "It's a beautiful evening. Let's not waste it on arithmetic." Sarah let him lead her outside, where the setting sun painted the sky in shades of gold and pink. They walked hand in hand toward their cabin, past neighbors who called out greetings, past children playing in yards, past the life they'd built in this small corner of Wyoming territory. "Got a message today," Daniel said as they walked. "Family up near Fort Bridger needs help. Father died, and the land office is trying to claim the mother can't hold the claim on her own. Thought I'd ride up there next week, see what I can do." "How long will you be gone?" "Week, maybe 2. Depends on how complicated the legal situation is." He glanced at her. "That all right?" "I know with the baby coming." "The baby won't be here for months yet," Sarah interrupted. "And that woman needs help. Go. Do what you do. Just promise me you'll be careful." "Always am." "Daniel Bridger, you came back last time with a bruised rib and a knife wound you tried to hide from me." "The knife wound was barely a scratch." Sarah stopped walking and turned to face him, her expression serious. "I know I can't stop you from helping people. I wouldn't want to, it's part of who you are, and I love that about you. But our child is going to need a father. So you be smart, and you be careful, and you come home to us. Understood?" Daniel's expression softened. He cupped her face in his hands, thumbs stroking her cheeks. "Understood. I've got everything I ever wanted right here. I'm not taking unnecessary risks anymore." "Good." He kissed her then, tender and sweet, and Sarah leaned into him, feeling the solid strength of him, the steady beat of his heart against hers. This man who'd saved her, who'd fought for her, who'd chosen her just as surely as she'd chosen him. When they reached their cabin, smoke was already rising from the chimney. Daniel had started a fire before coming to collect her from school. Inside, it was warm and welcoming, their few possessions arranged in a way that spoke of home and permanence. Sarah moved to the small kitchen area, preparing to start dinner, but Daniel caught her hand. "Dance with me," he said. "There's no music." "Don't need music." So they danced in their small cabin, swaying gently in the firelight, Daniel humming a tune Sarah didn't recognize. His hand rested on the small of her back, holding her close, and Sarah rested her head against his chest, listening to his heartbeat. "I love you," she said softly. "I don't say it enough, but I do. More than I knew I could love anyone. I love you too." His voice was rough with emotion. "You saved me, you know. I was so lost, so focused on the past and on revenge that I'd forgotten how to live. You reminded me." "We saved each other," Sarah corrected. "That's what partners do." They stayed like that, dancing slowly as the fire burned low and the stars emerged outside their window. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, Daniel's upcoming journey, Sarah's growing responsibilities at the school, the preparation for their child's arrival. But tonight, they had this moment, this perfect peace. And as Sarah Bridger held her husband close, feeling the life growing inside her and the life they'd built around them, she knew with absolute certainty that she was exactly where she was meant to be. The girl who'd stepped off that stagecoach months ago, desperate and alone, seemed like a different person now. She'd found her strength, her voice, her purpose. She'd found love and home and a future worth fighting for. And if that wasn't a happy ending, Sarah didn't know what was. The wind picked up outside, whistling through the pines with that distinctive sound she'd come to associate with Wyoming nights. Daniel stirred the fire, adding another log, then returned to her side. "What are you thinking about?" he asked, tucking a strand of hair behind her ear. "Everything. How I ended up here, how lucky I am, how scared I was that day at Miller's Post. Not luck, Daniel said firmly. Strength. Courage. You could have given in to Pike, taken the easy path even though it would have destroyed you. But you didn't. You fought back. With your help. I gave you an opportunity. You're the one who took it and made something of it. He kissed her forehead. Don't sell yourself short, Sarah. You're the strongest person I know. Sarah smiled, warmth spreading through her chest. We make a good team. The best. They prepared for bed, moving through the familiar routines of married life. As Sarah settled under the quilts, Daniel beside her, she thought about the journey that had brought her here, the losses, the fears, the moments of desperation. But also the kindness of strangers, the strength of community, the transformative power of love. Daniel, she said into the darkness. When our child asks about how we met, what are we going to tell them? He was quiet for a moment. The truth. That their mother was the bravest woman in Wyoming, that she refused to let bad men dictate her life, and that she gave their father a reason to stop just surviving and start living. That's a good story. It's our story. He pulled her closer. And it's not over yet. We've got a lifetime of chapters still to write. Sarah nestled against him, feeling safe and loved and hopeful for whatever came next. Outside, the Wyoming night stretched vast and star-filled, full of possibility and promise. She closed her eyes and let sleep claim her, dreaming of the future, of a child with Daniel's gray eyes and her determination, of students she would teach and people they would help, of a life built not on what others demanded but on what they chose together. It was everything she'd never dared to hope for. And it was just the beginning.